12 gauge steel skins. And what you're seeing here is actually insulation. It's a combination of cementitious and cellulose fibers. And the insulation provides both thermal insulation and acoustical insulation. So if you're pounding on these walls and so forth, that sound does not transmit to the next cell.
There's no digging out the cement or anything.
No, that's right, because the interior of the cell, in fact, when I going back, this is one of those cells. The interior of the cell is all 12 gauge steel. So what you have is a complete steel interior skin, and then it is coated. One of the nice things we like about the prefabrication of these is we're coating them with a polyurea. And a lot of you have seen these rhino linings you put in the back of pickup trucks. That's what these cells are coated with. It's not paint that's going to scrape off. It's a polyurea coating. It's very durable. You can come in here. There's no seams. There's no cracks. You can power wash the cell if you need to. You can disinfect the cell if you need to. So it's a very safe.
So those cells will be like dropped in with a crane or something.
That's correct.
And they're all ready to, pretty much ready to
Yeah, they come, actually they come like this. You'll have the door and the frame and the bunks, and won't have the mattresses in it, the light fixtures. They'll come, pre-made, and then you put it in the, lay it in the building, and then you have to connect from the outside. All this other duct work and mechanical, electrical, connecting to it, all has to be done in the field. But everything within the cell is already self-contained.
Yes, Joe, when we looked at the one in Kalamazoo, that area that's shown up there now, the inmates do not have access to that portion of it because as we went out the door, we could see where they were working, but the inmates are on the other side of there. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. The only people that would have access here would be the maintenance staff.
Right. Okay.
And the access to this corridor is outside the secure perimeter. And again, that's something that's different. Most jails, you actually have to go into the cell blocks. You have to lock all the inmates down, go into the cell blocks, perform the maintenance. Remember to take all your tools out when you leave, and before you could let the inmates back out of their cells. Here, all of the maintenance, with the exception of plunging a toilet or changing a light bulb, can all be done from outside the cell. Yes.
Just as a quick thing, the glass that's in the door, I think they refer to it as 5-hour glass or 3-hour glass or something. It would take that long to get through it.
The glass, there's various types of glass and various thicknesses and attack resistant. The glass we use in jails like this is an attack resistant glass. It's different than bulletproof glass. It's completely different characteristics. But the glass will range anywhere from 9/16 of an inch to 1.25 inches. And it's given an attack resistance. And most of the glass we use is somewhere around 30 to 40 minutes. And the way it's rated is it's 30 to 40 minutes to get through the glass with a fireman's axe or a sledgehammer. So so even if you have a fireman's axe or sledgehammer in the jail, which you're never going to have, it's going to take you a long time. You got plenty of time to get reinforcements there. So and the other thing about jails is there's always layers of redundancy. So if somebody gets through one layer, there's another door, another window, or something, and so forth. Yes, sir.
When you go through the tunnel, are the inmates going to have to go through the tunnel for visitation, or is there going to be a visitation in both the existing jail and the new one?
There will be multiple types of visitation in the building. The primary visitation will be video visitation. That the public would the public would come to one room in the jail. This red area right here in the existing building, that's the public lobby. The visitors would come to the public lobby, and there will be a visiting area in that area that will have video visitation stations. And then you can have video visitation stations throughout in every cell block. There might be 2 or 3 or whatever. And the benefit of that is, again, from a staffing standpoint, you're not moving as many prisoners.
I guess that's what I wanted to know. I mean, are we going to be running them up and down that tunnel all the time? No.
You will have a few that you might, like for instance, you might have some contact visitation, like attorneys. You might have that. And again, design haven't happened yet, so we really haven't made all these decisions, but there's typically non-contact visitation, contact visitation, and video visitation. The jail will have, to some extent, all three, but the primary visitation will be through video visitation.
With that tunnel, will the public be allowed to use that tunnel, or is that just, okay, good.
It's for inmates and staff.
Great. I was just sure you weren't gonna let it, but I
No, the
just
public-
had to ask.
The public in this jail building will never leave this area that's red right here.
Okay,
They never go, there's never a need for them to go any further than that.
Commissioner Say, what is the ratio of, in the new facility compared to the old facility? What would be the ratio of deputies monitoring inmates? You know, how many deputies to monitor how many inmates? Any idea?
I'd have to do some calculations, but it will be, the ratio will be more inmates to less staff. It'll be more staff efficient because of the design. And a lot of people think that staffing in jail is a function of, you know, X number of inmates and X number of staff, and it's more a function of design. So it's a matter of how many people can you physically or properly monitor at one point, and then where are those other services? How are you bringing food services? How are you bringing recreation services? Things like that. And the way this particular, at least in the new jail, is designed, if you have inmates leaving a cell block, they come out the corridor here and go down to recreation. And so you don't really have to have a staff member supervise that particular movement because they're all self-contained in this corridor. I didn't do the math to know what the ratios are, but it is much more efficient.
is there not a requirement from the state or the federal government for inmate to officer?
No.
No, there's not.
There is a standard in juvenile facilities of 1 staff per 8, but in an adult facility, it's all based upon design. And Michigan DOC, when you get to the design before you go out for bids and so forth, Michigan DOC will review the plans, review the staffing, and approve that before you actually build. So they will approve it, but there are no set standards.
All right, anybody else? All right, well, thank you.
I need to do juvenile.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Jump the gun.
Okay, on the juvenile facility, you know, this is, we looked at several options, and we like the idea of reutilizing an existing school. The problem with that is there wasn't really a good location, that there was good buy-in with an existing school. All your schools are all pretty much neighborhood schools. So what we have found is a great location on property you already own at South Campus. In this particular block, this is Pine Street here, so we're very close to the existing campus. This is Delaware, and Ambrosia Street is right here, and I think Goodwill is across the street over here. So we're basically utilizing the southwest corner of South Campus, and it's sitting on a parking lot. And this is the existing maintenance building, can remain in this tennis court, basketball court, so we can actually incorporate that into the design of the new facilities. We have basically a 40,000 square foot facility. The blue area would be the detention wing. This particular design shows 16 beds of detention on the west side of the building, 16 beds of treatment beds on the east side, and then the core of the building is basically those shared services. Food services, the kitchen and the dining room, recreation spaces, indoor recreation spaces, classrooms and so forth. They're all in the center of the building. And the detention kids and the treatment kids don't necessarily use the same space at the same time, but they use the same space at different times. So we just program those activities for the two types of kids we have in here. And then again, we position the treatment to the east so that it was a general feeling that there's going to be less emphasis on detention in this new facility and more emphasis on treatment. And so we wanted to allow more expansion opportunities for the treatment side of the facility. So that's why the yellow area here on the treatment side to the east, we can expand those components to the east on this site much more easily. This also positioning the building here, we don't have any utility relocation on this site. This is where Spring Street used to run through. Those utilities are still there. Even though the street's gone, the utilities are still there. And there's utilities running in the east-west direction as well. So we positioned the building so we don't have to incur those costs. And again, since no design has occurred, we've included a couple of images of other juvenile facilities just to show you the character of this thing can look like anything. Most likely the character of the Juvenile Transition Center will be more along the lines of a school. This is a facility, more of a detention type of facility in Muncie, Indiana. This is Hamilton County in Noblesville, Indiana. This is actually a 101-bed juvenile facility. But again, from design and materials, you can break this thing down. It doesn't have to look like a juvenile facility. It doesn't have to look like a big facility. And this is one of the housing components of the Kalamazoo County Juvenile Home. The outdoor recreation that will occur at the Juvenile Transition Center will actually be in a courtyard setting. They're not going to be outside of the facility, subject to the public and so forth. That this is actually a photograph from Kalamazoo, and you can see it's basically surrounded by building on all sides. So you can get outdoor recreation, you can have outdoor space, green space, recreation space, but still within the confines of the perimeter of the building. This is some common areas outside some of the classrooms and recreation spaces. This is the family visitation. All visitation in juvenile facilities is contact visitation. We won't have video visitation or non-contact visitation in a juvenile setting. It's all contact visitation. This is one example of a housing unit. This is a housing unit from Kalamazoo. This is actually the common day room between two 8-bed day rooms. Then the one question, parking's come up just about every meeting we've had for the last several months. So, and what we've done here for purposes of public consumption is this shaded area here is basically a block around the existing buildings. This is our Hall of Justice campus right here. This is across Pine Street where the new jail expansion would occur. And all of this property south of Apple is your South Campus. So we've identified that in that shaded area, we've identified up to 406 additional parking spaces that we can create if we need them. We are losing, we've done a summary of all of the parking, of what parking lots are we losing and how many spaces in that parking lot are actually used. Because for instance, like on the South Campus parking lot, we're losing the whole parking lot, but only about half of it was really ever used at a given time. So we've taken from photographs and so forth over time, we've identified that we can, by utilizing all of the parking spaces that aren't always occupied, we only have a deficit of between 100 and 200 parking spaces. So within that area of finding up to 406, it's not going to be difficult to replace the parking spaces that we actually lose. But so as we don't create an Oklahoma land rush around the courthouse all of a sudden, we'll just kind of leave it at that. But we have been working with staff to identify some of these parking opportunities. Yes, ma'am.
You know, those parking opportunities, it's fine to say that there's a certain amount of staff that's going to be displaced, but when in the court systems, sometimes they have juries and sometimes they'll call in 90 people in a day that have to have someplace to park, and they don't carpool because they're hoping they're not going to have to stay,
Right.
but they do have to park. I mean, that could be an additional 100 people a day, that you haven't, you don't have figured into this.
And there's the whole parking thing will have to take some very careful consideration once you get into the project. In that, I think there's going to have to be maybe more assigned parking. That some staff will park here, other staff will park here. This will be reserved for public, but that will require a great deal of thought. But what we're saying is there is the opportunity to be able to accommodate it.
Right, but going into a project like this, that accommodation could be a huge expense, not only in having to purchase more property, but to put in the parking, and to go ahead with something like this without even having a clue what that could cost, and if it's even a feasible option, I kinda have a little trouble with that. Oh, I'm sorry.
I can respond to that, Commissioner Hughes. I've been working on this issue for the last couple of months regarding parking, and I can tell you that the City of Muskegon is very pleased with the new design that's being proposed, and they are willing to work with the county, and they actually have indicated certain parcels that would be available, and we feel very confident that we will be able to accommodate all parking, and there would not be additional acquisition costs.
They're gonna give us the property?
I'm not gonna say that in public. I'm in negotiations with the city at this time.
I mean, but even if they gave us the property, you're gonna have to pave it, you're gonna have to, and I can tell you for one thing, I'm not gonna wanna hook it 4 blocks to get to the county building. So.
So that's,
I do have another question.
yes.
You know, I've spent some time in the court systems lately, and the people have told me that the trend now is not quite as much into placing juveniles in the juvenile transition centers. It's more towards group home type situations where they can live more in a home environment, become a little bit more responsible for themselves, more responsible to the community and the people that they live with. And this kind of makes it so that doesn't seem to be an option for the county. And as things progress, I wondered if maybe we would be better off to do the jail now and take another look at how things are progressing with the new options with the Juvenile Transition Center, maybe make them into 2 different options. I think maybe it will be easier for the taxpayers and the public to go with the jail now and the Juvenile Transition Center at another time. Or even if that time was 6 months down the road where we looked at some other options. Is that a possibility to do?
I see a couple of hands, I'll let those.
Let me just mention that the transition center is not a home for a lengthy period of time. Most of those kids are in and out within 2 weeks max. And they are set in different home settings at that point. We don't keep them, it's not a juvenile jail at all. We don't keep them hardly at all. They're there. It's a transition center. We keep them until they're adjudicated and then they're out the door. So the spaces for the detention, like I said, it'll be 2 weeks max probably. The others are almost like daytime folks come in to school.
And one thing I would like to add is that this proposal is conceptual. This is not the design phase, so we have not determined. And when we talk about the Juvenile Transition Center, there are talks going on between CMH, Family Court, Juvenile Transition, and Department of Human Services regarding creating flexible beds so that those beds can be used for different things at different times. And so that is something that when the design phase is complete, we will bring that to this board and tell them what the makeup of those beds are. But right now, we're in the conceptual, so.
But the proposal that's before us now is to move on to the design phase. And that is, we will be putting that out to bids for a design firm.
For an architect and for a construction manager.
And then will we have an opportunity for input into that too?
Absolutely. There will be internal committees, there will be external committees, there will be varying. The design phase is a very intense process and will require tremendous input from all stakeholders.
I'm not sure that I know I have all the facts, but I know I attended the DHS meeting last week. Now, because of the issues with child haven, those kids are being put in private placements, and nobody's talking about how much that costs, and it's very expensive. So if we do this, I think that it's a trade-off. I mean, this is actually a better option. I think the cost, minimum cost of doing it, if I remember right, was close to a couple $100 a day. So there's no, you know, it's expensive, whatever we do.
Right, it's expensive. I was just looking at doing the right thing and for the kids to making sure that they got what they needed so that they could become productive members of society, hoping that, you know, that would move them into a better place.
Okay, anybody else? That's it, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure to introduce to you Jim Sabonis from First Southwest.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Jim Sabonis from the First Southwest Company, as he's indicated. I'm Senior Vice President of the First Southwest Company, with a financial advisor to the county. I've worked in public finance for over 20 years. I've done over 1,000 bond transactions. My firm is among the top 2 largest in the country, and we're fortunate to be, as I've indicated before, not just a leader in size, but we've actually received numerous awards, including the Municipal Bond Transaction of the Year for the work we did for the Michigan Unemployment Transaction for this year. I'm here, and one of my partners, Andre, who has presented this presentation to you before. I was actually in another part of the country talking to another county about a jail. I'm going to tell you that this is a revision and update to the presentation, but it's really not a presentation. We work with your staff, Bonnie and Heath, on an ongoing basis to understand what your debt is, to make sure that all your liabilities are the lowest cost outstanding. The county has the highest credit quality, so if you do need to access the capital markets, you can do it cost effectively. So what we're going to talk about is not as much a static thing, it's something that we talk about and talk about on an ongoing basis. In summary, I'm here to tell you that you've got a big undertaking that you're deciding, but the good news is that the county's never been at a higher credit rating. It's got the highest bond rating that's ever had. It's got the debt capacity to fund this. That your existing debt is well structured. In fact, your debt statistics are very low compared to comparable counties. And most importantly is that there's a ready access. Interest rates are at near historical lows. And that there's been a flight to quality, and we think we have the lowest bond interest rates that we've seen in history at the time we sell this. But I'm going to tell you that our presentation starts where we think every one of our clients should start when they talk about an undertaking. When you start talking about issuing debt, you need to understand where you are right now, what your credit situation is, what your existing debt situation is, your debt capacity. So what we're going to do is talk to you about those and tell you about the marketplace. And then Heath later will actually talk about the plan of finance that's been put together here. The county has very high credit ratings. AA2 by Moody's, AA3 and AA by Moody's Standard & Poor's on limited tax debt. When they reviewed our financial policies and procedures, we have a strong, and it was recently upgraded, which is the highest that can be given to someone. Our short-term rating is SP1+, the highest rating bestowed by Standard & Poor's. Over the last 15 years, the county's bond ratings have increased to where the highest where they've been in history. Why is ratings important? Bottom line is, higher rating, the lower the risk investors, the cheaper that you can borrow at. When you look at the characteristics of your rating, there's 2 areas that we're going to talk to you about. There's things that you can control, and there's things that are products of the community you live in. I'm going to tell you that every aspect, when we look at the ratings, when they review what you can control, as commissioners, as staff, as citizens, you have very positive and strong attributes. We have a stable and diverse local economy. Our tax base is strong despite the recent contractions. We have a medium household income that reflects our community. But the things that we can control, we have a very strong financial position, we have strong reserves, and you have additional liquidity outside the general fund. You're good stewards of the county's money. You have brought in balanced budgets and historically fund surpluses. And your debt is moderate. We'll talk about your debt. And the majority of your debt is things that you do that is self-supported from revenues. Overlapping debt, again, things that you don't control are the biggest burden that you carry. Your current charges are, as a percent of your overall government expenses, are very low. You have addressed your pension unfunded liabilities and defined and suited a defined contribution plan. When they looked at your financial management, they talked about your long-term planning, your transparency. We received a strong. Again, our ratings reflect what you can do, and we believe they're highest they can be where they are. And I will say that these are not something that are taken lightly. The rating agencies actually manage and watch the ratings that we have. In fact, recently the county went through a review process with Moody's, as we're under constant review in the process. But why do we care about this? It simply comes down to this. The higher the rating, the lower the risk to investor, resulting in lower interest costs and ultimately a lower cost to the citizens. So again, over the last few years, your staff has looked at your financial policies, your procedures, your investment policies. You've done everything you can to have the highest ratings that you have, which you currently have. When you look at the amount of debt that you have, the state limits the amount of debt at 10% of the state realized value, which would be $474 million. Our legal amount outstanding is $144. We could actually fund an additional $330 million. But as I tell most of my clients, what everyone's ability to fund is what they're willing to pay. So clearly, when we look at your cost, the goal is what can you pay, and again, our expectation is that with your willingness to pay, your ratings would stay in place. In fact, the plan was discussed with the Moody's as we've gone through the recent review. It's very well received. When you look at the amount of debt that you have outstanding, you have it from a variety of sources. It's not just the county, but it's the things that the county does for a variety of areas. We have debt that comes from the Michigan Transportation Fund notes, from the Finance Authority commitments that have been fully drawn. We look at all our ad valorem revenue debt, quality of life ad valorem debt, our special assessments, liquid tax revenue debt, our water system, wastewater, and our transportation fund. When you look at it, and this is an important thing I wanted to talk to you about, is when we say $144 million is outstanding,